Joining us on the program now is Dr. Craig Heilmann. Craig, kia ora. Good morning. Thanks for your time today.
Morning, Andrew. Great to speak to you again.
Now, you and me, like most other people on the planet, if we'd put money on who we thought was going to become the Pope, we would have lost money on
Probably
on Friday on that one. Not that I recommend betting on the outcome of conclaves of cardinals. However, some surprises, be fair to say, at the selection of who the Pope is, right?
Funny you should bring up gambling. I just read this morning that a lot of people made a lot of money on this bloke winning, and people are wondering how the betting markets knew who was going to win.
Okay.
But anyway, that's just obviously there are other smoke signals going on from within the Catholic Church. It's not just the stuff going up the pipe in black and white. There's other smoke signals happening. Anyway, you and I were not privy to it. Otherwise, we might have made a pretty big.
We might have. We might have. When it comes to, I suppose, the selection process. In some ways, it's different, and I want to get your opinion on this, because some people are saying, oh, well, this is the most divine form of democracy. You've got a number of people who are selected for their Christ-likeness, who are all making decisions based on the Holy Spirit and what they hear from the Holy Spirit, and you need 2/3 of them to be in agreement. There's wonderful opportunity for God to speak through these individuals. But in other ways, it's just like any other election, in that there's factions and lobbying and course corrections and all those sorts of things. And in some ways, and I hesitate to say this, is not dissimilar from the results we've had with the Aussie election.
That's very true. In fact, it looks like the last elder meeting that I was at. No, we do everything by unanimity, not a 2/3 majority.
Yeah.
But look, the funny part is, Andrew, you're absolutely right. I mean, the whole thing's political. It has to be. And there are factions in the Catholic Church. And, I mean, there were plenty of criticisms of the last Pope and plenty of people defending him. And that represented different, political points of view about his political beliefs, really, not just his religious beliefs. So I think it is very political. Obviously, I'm happy to give the Catholic Church credit. They run what would you call it? It's a pretty arcane process, but it seems to work. You do get eventually some white smoke coming up the chimney. Yep. And that's it. It works. But is it political? Yeah, I think it's political. And I think this Pope is a centrist, and I think he kind of proves the point that it's a bit political.
Is there something in the name? People have made the point that, I mean, he's Leo the 14th. Leo the 13th was probably one of the first popes who said, hey, we should be caring for the poor.
Absolutely, and in fact, he's famous for writing that document Rerum Novarum. In there, he basically denounced the extremes of the labour movement on the one side, but the extremes of laissez-faire capitalism on the other. And he talked about a compassionate form of essentially of capitalism in the West, and so much about Catholic social theory and Catholic sort of social activity is connected to what the popes have written. And so, I think choosing that name is significant. It suggests he's going to play some sort of mediating role and trying to make capitalism more compassionate, and he's definitely going to continue the last Pope's work in terms of worrying about the poor, as the Church should always do. So I think those are really good things. Leo, of course, means lion, so his name is the Lion. And the first Pope Leo was Leo the Great, who was back sort of around Augustine's day, died just after Augustine. So 5th century, so 1600 years ago. And Leo is famous also for sort of keeping the Church together when it went through some difficulties and there were potential heresies and splits. And I just wonder whether he's chosen this name as a bit. I think he's a mediating character, and I think he's chosen a papal name as a kind of a mediator's name.
Well, a conversation I was having on Friday, actually, about interested to get your thoughts on this. Do you think they go into the conclave with a, hey, if I get chosen, name in their back pocket? Do you think that they go, well, if I get elected Pope, God willing, then this is the name that I would go for? Do you know what happens behind the scenes of the conclave? Any thoughts?
Look, I'm just speculating because I don't really know, but I'm imagining that if you thought you were in the running for this, that you probably would have thought about, like the last Pope took up Francis's name and decided he wanted to be, a Francis-like figure, Francis of Assisi. So it makes sense that they would think, I guess if you thought you were genuinely going to be in the running for this, and maybe this guy did, maybe he didn't, I don't know. I assume he probably did think he had a chance. you'd probably think about what name you might take. And yeah, I think it seems to me deliberately chosen because they want to reflect something of the tradition of the church. And the names of these popes do represent emphases within the Catholic tradition. Are you going to be worrying about the poor? Are you going to be worrying about doctrine?
Yeah.
Which one are you going to be worrying about? And those sorts of things. And look, the other thing to think about this bloke too, he's an Augustinian friar. He was the general of the Augustinians. It's an order of monks in the Catholic Church. He's the first one it's an Augustinian friar. There've been other Augustinian priests and people, Gregory the Great, for example, and several others that have been popes. But this is the first Augustinian friar in the church that's become pope. The Augustinians typically are sort of the teachers and educators of the Catholic Church. So it's interesting that his first instinct was to talk about compassion for the poor, etc. So anyway, I do think a mediating figure trying to help the Catholic Church overcome some of the upsets of the last few years, including the banning of the Latin Mass, which a lot of my friends who are Catholic have been extremely upset about.
Now, you mentioned Leo the Lion. Of course, that's what the term Leo means, but other commentators are saying, well, he's a bit of a toothless lion, actually. It's more the metaphor of the lion laying down with the lamb. It's more of a peacemaker than an aggressor. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I've read a lot of that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a wonderful name when you think about it, to be called the Lion of the Lionheart. That image of the lion for anyone in the medieval world always bespeaks courage.
Yeah.
I personally think this bloke's going to be courageous. I know he's American, he's from Chicago, he should be tough as nails, but he's also got this Peruvian thing going on where he's been essentially a missionary in Peru. So he straddles many worlds. And I think he's been chosen for that purpose. I'm hoping, I'm praying, I'm pulling for the guy. I hope he works out to be a great pope. I think the last Pope Francis, a lot of people loved him. A lot of people didn't love him. He was not a uniter in that sense. And he seems to have been he seems to have been a little bit difficult to deal with, I think, for those that had to deal with him in their inner circles of the Catholic Church.
When it comes to that he's from Chicago, that he's American, is that a positive? I mean, the first time an American Pope has been elected, and American culture and economy, of course, continuing to dominate the world.
I know it's a strange one, eh? I can only assume the fact that he's spent so much of his life in Peru had some role to play in this, because you'd think by this point the Catholic Church would be looking to the global south for its new leadership, because that's where the church is thriving and growing. It's not growing in Europe. It's probably not growing in North America, but it is growing in the global south. So you would have thought, well, I mean, I was praying for an African pope myself. We haven't had an African pope since about the 3rd or 4th century. So 1,600 years is a long time between drinks. I would have liked to have seen an African pope. Anyway, we've got a bloke who's from Chicago who's half Peruvian or something. So why not?
Exactly. Now,
let's go for it.
The other thing I wanted your comments on, because as we started the conversation, we're talking about how this is sort of political. Already some political comments about some of the things that he tweeted before he became Pope. Of course, there's some things that cardinals can get away with that popes can't. Some quite strong pushback against both President Trump and Vice President Vance.
Yeah, so speaking out regarding immigration, I think it was largely to do with children that he was talking to, and I can't recall offhand what he said about Vance, but I know he did have something to say.
It was a pushback. Vance was quoting Latin, which look, if you're quoting Latin, then
what I do know what it was. He said something about that you love the person nearest to you.
Yes.
As opposed to loving everybody, and Leo pushed back and said that no, Jesus asked us to love everybody. Well, actually, both are true. Funny enough, in the Catholic tradition, you are supposed to love loving your neighbour means starting with your proximate neighbour, which is your family, and then the people on your street, etc. So probably both are right at one level. Good on him though. You can't be a church leader if you're not prepared to push back on politicians.
Exactly, and I think the idea that that Vance was quoting was an St. Augustine idea, so perhaps there's some middle ground.
It is absolutely. No, it is. It is indeed, and so I'm sort of But I do understand what I think. I think maybe Leo misread what he was trying to say, and decided to emphasise the universal aspect of love, and that's certainly there with Jesus.
Yep.
But I do think the Catholic tradition generally has said that you start with the people nearest to you, and you work your way upwards from there. I mean, I always worry, and you know this because we've talked about it. I worry about the liberals like Jacinda Ardern who have what I call the 30,000 feet view of compassion, which is they love everybody in the abstract, but nobody in the particular. They don't care about anybody concrete, but they love everybody. And to me, no, if you're going to love your neighbour, you've got to start with someone you could actually be in contact with and help them. And I think that that's probably all Vance was trying to say. Yeah.
Hey, appreciate your comments as always, and there is a little bit of wait and see what unfolds in the space. But Craig, I appreciate your analysis. Thanks for joining us.
Bless you, mate. And look, I have no idea whether he gets paid more than you and I, but who knows?
Thanks, mate. Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.